Hi, this is Sabrina from LCA Spotlight, and this is our guest feature where we answer your questions and dig deeper into accessibility topics. Our guest today is Diane Elkins. Diane is with Artisan eLearning and eLearning Uncovered. She is known for her award-winning courses, her work as an author, trainer, and an instructional designer. Diane, can you get us started by telling us about your accessibility journey?
Certainly, and thanks for having me, and thanks for giving a megaphone to this topic in our industry. So I so appreciate what you and the other folks at LCA are doing. So my journey started with accessibility. I started in e-learning in 2000. So in terms of e-learning, that's a really long time. And it didn't even come on my radar as a thing until 2009, which really speaks to privilege. You know, that I didn't have to know about it, that there's this whole other world that I didn't know anything about. And so part of me is like, wow, you know, that was like a real wake up call for me, is that I was just living in my own world and assumed everybody was like me. And it came up for me because a client asked for it. So one of our clients is Goodwill Industries International. So you probably think about them as the donated goods retail store where you take your boxes from your garage. And one of their big areas of focus is, their big area of focus is helping people have life and family sustaining jobs and careers. And they target people with barriers to employment, and people with disabilities is a big part of their target market. So it was very important for them that they walk the walk and talk the talk, and that their courses are fully accessible. And so they came to us, and I'm like, I don't even know what that is. And so I set out to learn it and realized it was not easy to learn, especially back then, 2009. So it's that 14 years ago, there really wasn't a lot that I could find out there. Back then, I didn't know anything about WCAG. That didn't come on my radar till like 5 years ago. It was the Section 508 standards of the US law, which I think were very subjective. And it was a struggle, I'll be honest, but I bought into the concept. Most people get into this industry because they want to be helpful. They want to share their message. And I don't want there to be a big if attached to this. So I'm going to share my message to anybody. Everybody has the right to get better at their jobs if you don't have an issue with color contrast. You get to get better at your job if you can hear. And so it's something that really resonated for me, and I've spent the past 14 years trying to learn about it. And I'll be honest, it's not easy, especially because it feels like a lot of what's out there is written for web programmers. And sometimes it's hard to connect the dots between what the guidance says and what we do. So I'm all in on figuring it out and helping other people figure it out.
No, that's so great, because, we get to learn from you. And I totally agree that it is not easy to decipher, especially the way they're written for the web. And we totally appreciate you sharing your knowledge. So let's get started with our questions. A lot of these are sourced from our community. So one of the first question is, why should we care about audio or video being accessible in our training?
Right. So audio and video are fantastic training aids. And one of the things that's, I think, important to know about accessibility is that accessibility is not about what you have to take out, it's about what you add. If you have a building, if you're going to add a ramp, you don't take out the stairs. If audio is the best way to communicate something, well, let's use audio. And if video is the best way to communicate something, well, let's use video. It doesn't mean we have to stop doing these things. But instead, it's about, great, I have just used a medium that assumes a certain physical ability. If I'm doing a video, I'm assuming you can see. And so since I don't want to make that assumption anymore, I do things for the person who can't see my video. So it's not that we can't do these things. It's that if we don't want that big if, hey, you get to be better at your job, but only if you can see my video, and you get to get better at your job, but only if you can hear my audio. As long as we don't want to put that big if there, that's kind of a no-brainer. We're going to make sure that our audio and video are both accessible.
Yeah, we want to make sure we reach all our learners and, not exclude them. So what are some common audio or video accessibility errors a person might make who's new to Storyline 360?
Okay, so with Let's start first about audio. Audio to me is the low-hanging fruit of accessibility. Like if you want to go on an accessibility journey and make your courses fully WCAG compliant and even go beyond WCAG, great, all in. But that could, that doesn't happen overnight. Closed captioning can happen overnight. I mean, it is not hard to do at all. The tools make it very easy. There are plugins that you can use. There are third-party services where if you'd rather write a check than do it yourself, you can do it yourself. Like it is not hard to add closed captioning. And it is such a huge improvement for who can't hear for whatever reason. And, disabilities can be full or partial. They can be temporary or permanent, and they can be situational. So I want to do it for the person who has no other option. If someone who is deaf, if there's no closed captioning, they have no other option. In doing so, will I help the person who's in a noisy environment? Sure. That's not why I'm going to do it, but there's a nice benefit there. And so in terms of closed captioning, probably the biggest mistakes that I see, one is not doing it at all. The second would be assuming that a transcript is just as good. Like the transcript panel in Storyline, or I'll make a PDF. And those aren't bad things to do. One of the things that I've learned about accessibility is that choices are fantastic. So if you give people the option to listen to your audio, read the transcript, read closed caption, there's nothing wrong with providing the transcript panel or in a PDF. But if I can't hear and I have to read the transcript over off to the side, it's going to be a little bit harder for me to read paragraphs while I'm looking at the visual. Whereas closed captions, it gives me little bits right there on the screen. It's easier for me to glance back and forth. The other disadvantage of the transcript is, let's say I've got 3 paragraphs. Most people read faster than someone speaks. So if I've got things synchronized on my slide, I could be reading in the transcript paragraph 3, but I'm still seeing the visuals for paragraph 2. And in my mind, I'm trying to make them fit and they're not fitting. So a transcript is better than nothing. So if you're not doing anything, transcripts are easy, great. But having the captions synchronized is far and away preferable for the deaf and hard of hearing community. So synchronized captions. The other thing that I've heard is that sometimes people don't provide some of the context necessary. So if you have a narrator and then a character come in, you have to indicate what's the narrator and what's the character. Or if there's 3 characters, when does it switch back and forth from character to character? And if it's a scenario and the person is sounding frustrated in their tone, well, that needs to be included as well. So if there's any kind of nuance in the tone or the energy or the pitch that's going to be important for someone who can hear it, it needs to be helpful for someone who can't hear it. And that's like my litmus test. Is that important for the person to hear it, who can hear it? Great. How can the person who can't hear it get that same information?
We need to provide our learner with as many choices as possible. So have captions, excuse me, and a transcript. Make sure they have multiple choices.
Right. And if the having the transcript in addition to the captions is above and beyond. So it's a great addition. It's not required. Now, what WCAG says is that if you have synchronized media, you must have synchronized captions. So there's what's the right thing to do, and then what does WCAG say? And WCAG says if your media is synchronized, you must have synchronized captions. Now, you may not have synchronized media. You may have static slides. As soon as the slide loads, whatever's on there is on there the whole slide. Technically, in that case, you do not have to synchronize your captions. A transcript would be appropriate. Synchronized captions are still preferred to the deaf and hard of hearing community. Because remember, full and partial. If I'm hard of hearing, I might be using the closed caption to supplement the fact that I am trying to listen. You think about it, if sometimes I'll watch one of the, like a British crime drama I watched recently, and there was this one captain, I couldn't follow what he was saying because of his accent. And so having the closed captions was a nice support. So even if you have static slides, synchronized captions are preferred, but if your slides are synchronized, they're required for WCAG compliance. And I did think of one other, if I may, Sabrina, of things I commonly see. Now that there are so many AI tools that automate captions, that is great and can be a huge time saver. None of them are 100% accurate. And I bet you would not be okay if your storyboard script was 95% accurate. So why would you be okay with your closed captions being 95% accurate? So you can use the AI tools to save you time, absolutely, but go in and double check. Do not rely on AI to get you where you need to go for training content.
Really a good point to make, because it doesn't speed up the process, but then you want to make sure what you're saying is accurate. So before we go into captions, and we were talking about narration, let me ask that question first. Now, there are conflicting opinions when it comes to audio narration. People say you should not have narration in your courses. Some people say you should. But what are your thoughts about audio narration in general?
Okay, good question. We could go on for an hour. So I'm going to separate it into two buckets. One is the instructional design philosophy. The other is the accessibility philosophy. So first off, there's nothing in WCAG that says you have to or you shouldn't. So there are a lot of misconceptions out there. Oh, I can't have audio in an accessible course, or I have to have audio. Otherwise, how will they know what's on the text? Well, a screen reader would provide that. So you don't have to, and it's not forbidden. It is your choice, 100%. So let's go from the instructional design side. I always refer back to the book E-Learning and the Science of Instruction by Ruth Colvin-Clark and Mayer is his last name. I forget. Robert. I think it's Robert Mayer. Where if you've not read that book, it's fantastic. E-Learning and the Science of Instruction. And it's where they do lessons in different ways, and they have people take it and then take tests. So it's not about this trend or that fad, but what works. And what they're finding is that for complex material, the best learning method is when you have audio as the primary communication channel and then visuals that support it. Not a straight match to text. They actually found that if you have bullet points and you are reading the bullet points verbatim, that actually inhibits learning. That is worse than just text or just audio. You combine them, you've made it worse. But if instead it's key visual, so it's a key word, it's a diagram, it's a representative image. So because of that, I am a fan of audio in e-learning courses. Now, can you learn without audio? Absolutely. I've learned many things in my life by reading a book, right? So it's not required, it's not forbidden. I like to use it, but there are issues other than just closed captioning. So again, closed captioning is a fairly simple thing to do for folks. But then the other challenge with audio is the potential conflict with someone using a screen reader. So if I am visually impaired, I may choose to use a screen reader that's going to read to me that text on the slide. That's going to read to me the description that the programmer put to that image, the alt text. So it's going to read to me what's happening. Well, if there's audio playing and my screen reader is trying to talk, they're talking over each other. And that's a conflict. And so a lot of people shut down then and say, well, clearly I can't have audio. No, it just means you need to manage for that. And so there are a couple of ways that you can manage that conflict. One is, and what we do at Artisan is we provide, first of all, on the very first slide, we don't put any audio. That way the learner has a chance to orient themselves to the course, figure out where everything is. If I'm using a screen reader, I don't know where the next button is. I don't know that there's a menu. Like, I need time to get my bearings. So we personally choose never to put audio on the very first slide. And then we have a little link or button that's called accessibility preferences or accessibility instructions. And it explains to the learner how to use keyboard navigation and such. And it includes a preference to turn off autoplay. So by default, a slide is going to play when you arrive on it. But with a very simple trigger on a master slide, you can say pause the timeline on this slide when the slide loads if this variable is false. So we create an autoplay variable defaulted to true. They check that box if they don't want it to autoplay. Now there's a downside to that, because when I arrive on slide 3 and I have things synchronized to the audio and the slide doesn't start, none of that content is there. So I need to be careful that if they pause autoplay and they show up on a blank slide, that's not helpful either. But the goal is to give them a choice. Is I will press play when I want to press play. You don't get to choose for me. So they'll still play the slide to hear that audio, but they'll do it on their terms. Now, one of the things Storyline did a year ago, maybe even 2 years now, I've lost all sense of time in the last 3 years. About 2 years ago is they added keyboard shortcuts for the user. So that is, first of all, I think helpful for everybody. I'm a huge keyboard shortcuts fan, but it's especially great for people using assistive technology. Because if I say, well, my course has a play pause button, yeah, but the learner using a screen reader has to tab all the way through that button and be listening to the screen reader while your audio is playing just to hit the pause button. That's not helpful. Well, Control-Alt-P is pause. Control-Alt-M is mute. Control-Alt-N is next. The keyboard shortcuts that come in Storyline are, I think, helpful for everybody, but they're massively helpful for people who use assistive technology. The challenge, I love that Articulate did this, and I feel like they fell this short, is they don't tell the learners that they're there. There's no way for a learner to automatically know that there are keyboard shortcuts. And so it's my job to tell them. So on that first page, I'll have an accessibility preferences button, and I'll have a button that says keyboard shortcuts. And I think that can also help. Now, if we go back to the WCAG guidelines, in fact, let me share my screen and I will actually pull up the guidelines. So
sure.
A second. Share my screen, number 2, and go to WCAG. So let's see, I had the audio description one up, and that's not what I want. I want the autoplay. So I don't have it handy. Quick, hang on, let me search for seconds. There we go, audio control. If any audio on a web page plays automatically for more than 3 seconds, either a mechanism is available to pause or stop the audio, or a mechanism is available to control audio volume independently from the overall system volume. So we don't even have to question what the minimum requirement is because it's right there. It's 1.4.2. It's a level A requirement. This requirement exists because of that conflict and potentially other issues. So if you only wanted to meet the minimum, and again, this is just level A, your standard player in Storyline is going to do it. If you have something that plays automatically for more than 3 seconds, there's a mechanism to pause or stop the audio. Yep, play pause button, mute button, right. Volume button, or mechanism is available to control audio volume independently from the overall volume level. Early in my e-learning career, I didn't put volume controls in my e-learning because I thought, well, here, I've got a mute button right here on my keyboard. But if I mute it on my system, I've also muted my screen reader. So it's important that learners are able to mute just the course and keep the screen reader going. So all you need is a play pause button or that volume button, and you are compliant. I choose to go a little farther and have that autoplay option because, again, choices are really good for accessibility. So that's what I recommend doing. And then again, letting people know about the keyboard shortcuts. They're especially helpful for your keyboard only users and for your screen reader users.
So to summarize, we have accessibility preferences at the beginning of the course, also letting our learners know where all the different controls are. And then also we have the play pause button and any keyboard navigation so that they don't have to search, reader user. So going back to caption, could you just give us a demo about how to add captions in Storyline 360?
Absolutely. Okay, so here I have a Storyline course here with a little bit of audio, and I've got my text here in the notes panel. So I'm going to just grab a little bit of this text here. Normally I'd have my storyboard up on the other monitor, but I'm just going to grab, I can't actually tell if I have selected that. So here in the timeline, I'll go to my audio, and then on the options tab, I can go to add captions. It's going to bring up the waveform. And when you're making captions, one of the best practices is to break your captions in logical places in terms of thought and grammar. So if you have a prepositional phrase, on the fence, you wouldn't split up on the and fence. You try and keep them together. And Storyline automatically tries to guess where your natural pauses are and gives you captions accordingly. Doesn't always get it right. For example, it just missed this one completely. I might decide that one's too short and I want to combine. So it's not perfect, but that's okay. And I'm going to paste my text in here. Now, one of the tools that I encourage you to go look at is the DCMP captioning key. DCMP captioning key. And it's a whole document on the best practices around closed captioning, like how long should they be? You don't want them to be too long. So, is this one too long? I think this one's borderline. So I'd put my text in there. Now, unfortunately, once you have this open, you can't go back to your Storyline Notes panel. That's why I would have my my storyboard up on the other screen. But you could, maybe you don't have a transcript already, so you can also just listen here.
Sure, you could fit 3 bottles of detergent.
And there you go.
Sure, you could fit 3 bottles of detergent in one bag.
Don't worry, I won't do this the whole way because you did not come here to watch me type. And then in terms of timing, you can adjust the timing however you want. So for example, this is really short. And if it's only up for half a second, it's not going to be enough time for someone to read it. So I might say, well, let me use up some of this blank space here to make that a little bit longer.
We don't want our customers to struggle when getting.
So I'm going to split this caption into 2, and I can move them around. And here I'm missing a caption, so I am going to add a caption. So caption, there you go. So you adjust them just like you do anything on the timeline, but you can decide how big you want the captions to make. You paste them in. Now, once I save and close, if I go, and remember I have to be on the audio and I'm on audio options, the same is true for video. Once I'm done, I can then edit captions and go in and make any changes. Now, when I first go to preview this,
consider the ultimate weight of the bag when deciding how to pack everything.
By default, captions are turned off, and what you get is a captions button. So over here in my player, I have a CC button. If I didn't have captions on this slide, that button would not be there. So the minute you add captions, what you add is the CC button, and then the learner can activate them what they want. And it's a global setting, so if I turn it on for this slide, it will continue to be on for future slides unless I turn it off. This is a feature in the player dialog box. It is turned on by default, and again, it will only show up if you actually have captions. Now, some people like to turn them on by default, not the button, but like to actually have them show by default. Remember, by default, they do not show. The learner has to go in and do it. One philosophy is make your course less work for the folks who have to use assistive technology. Make it easier for the people who can see and click more freely. So if you wanted to do that, that closed caption button is managed with a variable. But if you go to the variables dialog box and built in, and then you go to player display captions, the default value is false. If I go in and set it to true, then when I preview the slide, the course, publish the course, whatever it is I'm doing,
consider the
they are
ultimate
on
weight
by
of the
default
bag when
when
deciding how to pack
go in
everything.
and turn them off.
Sure, you
So
could
it's an
fit
easy
3 bottles of
one-time change if you would like them to be on by default. Now,
yeah. I'm sorry, I was just going to say that's an excellent tip. Go on.
Good. Now, you may notice they feel a little small on this particular course. Some of that has to do with how big my monitor is. Some of it has to do with, so see if I have it on a smaller monitor, it feels bigger in proportion to the slide. Some of it has to do with how big your slide size is. So if I want to make the closed caption bigger relative to the rest of my course, in the player dialog box, there we go, it's going to be a little small. And I go to the, is it colors and effects? Yes. Captions font, you can change the font, and you can also change the relative percentage. So right now I have the default, so I can change it maybe to 125%. And now if I were to preview it,
consider the ultimate weight of the bag when deciding how to pack
on a large
everything.
monitor. So
sure,
you can choose to do. Now, I mentioned also one of the things you can do is use third-party AI tools or a vendor, like we use 3Play Media at Artisan, is you can also import caption files. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to delete my caption file. And then rather than add it manually, I can import a file here. So VTT, SRT, there's a couple of different formats. In fact, it'll tell you right here. You can take an SRT, VTT, SBV, or SUB files. So these are the files you would get if you're using a third-party tool or a third-party vendor. So I would, if I use 3Play Media, I'm going to upload my audio file. I'm going to upload my script to save a little money so they don't have to transcribe it also. And then they give me, I give them money. So 3 things, my audio file, my script, and my money. And they give me this file for every audio file. And I go click, open, no, click, open, and I'm done. Like, it's added. And if I want to edit, I still can. So I can still go in now and edit it however I want. So that's a nice feature. The other thing that you can do is and I'm sorry, what is, let me explain what that is a VTT file is just a text file. So let me pull this up on my other monitor so you don't have to watch me again. It's just a text file. So you could make it yourself if you wanted to, but you don't even necessarily, you know, I can't imagine you ever making one from scratch, but just so that you know it's not like this mythical creature, here's what it is. Let's see if I can make that a little bit bigger for you. From 0.5 seconds to 4.47 seconds, this is the text it plays. From 4.6 seconds to 10.3 seconds, this is the text it plays. So it's just timestamp, text, timestamp, text. So they're nothing fancy, but it's somebody else doing it for you. So this is a common output format. You can also
question on the transcript too. So very often, you know, we use the VTT file or try to use that as a transcript. You would have it maybe in Word, but I think a good practice is not to have the timestamps in there. And sometimes it can be like a tedious process to get rid of all the timestamps. Is there a tool which can do that for us, or is there a best practice to make it faster?
So the question is, if all I have is a VTT and I don't have a transcript, how can I easily turn it into a transcript by automatically deleting all of those? I don't know, but I'd pay for that tool.
Yeah.
One other thing about Captions is the media library is really great for managing it at a global level. So if you go to the media library, is it going to show me the media library? Of course it's not. Okay, so I'm going to describe it and everybody put on your make-believe hats. So in the media library, there's a tab for all your audio and there's a column for closed captioning. So you'll see a little caption icon on every audio file that has closed captions. So it's a quick way to double check your work. Look, oh, that audio file does not have closed captioning on it. And then you can click that button right there. So if I'm, let's say I have gone to 3Play Media and I have 30 slides, so I have 30 VTT files. Well, I can go to slide 1, select the audio, options tab, import, whatever, and then go to the next slide. It's like 6 clicks per slide. I can just go to the media library, audio 1, click it, add it. 2, click, add. 3, click, add. 4, click, add. So if you're doing something at a global level, the media library might be a quicker way to do it.
That's a great tip. So you just click and it adds, and then you just import it to that particular slide. Right
from there, right from the media library.
That's
so
awesome.
All the slides in one place.
That's an excellent tip. So since we have your demo up here, I don't know if you have a video in there. To make a video accessible, what should we be thinking of, or what should we do?
Good. So with the video, you've got 2 options, or 2 audiences you want to make sure you're serving. One is your deaf and hard of hearing audience, and so you've got the same closed captioning considerations. There really aren't many differences. A video, you're probably more likely to have maybe a change in speaker than you might in a straight audio file. So all the things I talked about, change in speaker, any significant tone, any significant sound effects. But closed captioning is extremely similar. It's the same in Storyline. You go to the video file, you go to the options tab, you import. Is the same process. So I'm going to focus more on the second group of users, and that is the folks who can't see the audio. So a lot of people think, well, I'll just provide the transcript and a screen reader can read it. Well, the transcript is just the audio. What about the visual information? Now, if you just have a talking head, there might not be any extra visual information, in which case the audio is perfectly fine. But if there's any visual information, you have to figure out how someone who can't see is going to get that visual information. And so there are two main ways to do that. One is to write more carefully so that your visual information is already covered in the video. So I'm going to take this one. Now this is not a video, but it's a synchronized slide, and a synchronized slide you need to treat almost like a video in the same way. So I'm going to play this slide.
Consider the ultimate weight of the bag when deciding how to pack everything. Sure, you could fit 3 bottles of detergent in one bag, but should you? We don't want our customers to struggle when getting their groceries back home and into the kitchen. Unless that customer has a specific preference, keep bags to 15 pounds or lighter.
Okay, so imagine that was maybe a motion graphics video I made in After Effects and I brought in, or just the fact that it's a synchronized slide. Synchronized slides in Storyline are practically videos for all intents and purposes. So how do I deal with the person who couldn't see those videos? Well, in this case, the audio is adequately describing it. So I want you I'm going to play the audio again, and I've got the closed captions going here. So I want you to ask yourself, if you couldn't see the visual and all you got was that audio, or you read the transcript, is there anything you would miss because you couldn't see it?
Consider the ultimate weight of the bag when deciding how to pack everything. Sure, you could fit 3 bottles of detergent in one bag, but should you? We don't want our customers to struggle when getting their groceries back home and into the kitchen. Unless that customer has a specific preference, keep bags to 15 pounds or lighter.
So what would I even add? Like, would it really be helpful to say, hey, there are 3 bottles and they jump into a bag that's sitting on a scale? That doesn't add any value. So I don't need to do anything extra to address the visual information. And so sometimes if you just add 2 or 3 extra words to your script, you can adequately describe the visual component. So one of the things that's really important, and I see new folks get this confused, is they go back and forth between, am I focusing on the person who can't hear it or the person who can't see it? So right now I'm focusing on the person who can't see it. If I can't see it, have I missed anything? No, I haven't missed a thing. That's helpful or relevant. Does that mean I shouldn't have graphics? No, I mean, the graphics are helpful for the people who can see them, but it's not like there's extra information that I'd miss out on. So I have another example that's way more complex. So let me pull that up. Hang on, it is right here. And that is systems training. So teaching on computer systems is like a whole extra category. So here I have a very stereotypical systems training. It's on how to do conditional formatting in Microsoft Excel. So I'm going to play this twice. So first I'm just going to play it through. It's maybe a minute and change.
To set up conditional formatting, start by selecting the cells you want to format. Then on the Home tab, click the Conditional Formatting drop-down button and select the type of formatting you want. Next, you'll select the type of argument you want. Next, enter the condition. From there, pick the formatting you want to use on any cell meeting that criteria. Here you can either select one of the pre-made options or choose a custom format. Once you're done, click OK. Now the formatting is automatically applied and automatically updated when the values change.
Okay, I'm going to play that again. And this time I want you to consider, if you couldn't see what was happening and all you heard was the audio, what would you be missing? So
I think all of it.
yeah, there's a lot. So let's play it again and everybody think about that for a minute. What would you miss? And Sabrina, you're right.
To set up conditional formatting, start by selecting the cells you want to format. Then on the Home tab.
So for example, like what are we even trying to accomplish? I don't even like, you have a great example. So if you're the instructional designer, you probably spent a lot of time picking this inventory list as your example. And you got just the right example. So because the example provides useful context. If I can't see with this script, I have no idea what the context is. I don't even know what we're trying to do.
Click the Conditional Formatting drop-down button and select the type of formatting you want.
Okay, select the type of formatting we want. I don't even know what you're talking about. You mean like bold versus red? I don't know what you mean. I can't see that.
Next, you'll select the type of argument you want.
What's a type of argument?
Next, enter the condition.
What's a condition?
From there, pick the formatting you want to use on any cell meeting that criteria.
What are my choices?
Here you can either select one of the pre-made options or
Okay,
choose a custom
what are
format. Once you're done, click OK.
Okay, that one I understood.
Now the formatting is automatically applied.
To what? What formatting? What was it applied?
And automatically updated when the values change.
What values are changing? Why are values changing? Like, I have no clue.
To set up
okay, so now let's look at a different version of the same video.
Here I have an inventory spreadsheet, and I want to highlight in red any cells where the item has more than $5,000 tied up in inventory. To set up conditional formatting.
Pause it there. So there's a little bit of context about the example. Now, it didn't go into, here's what's in column A, and here's what's in column B, and here's what's in column C. And C5 is $19. But it's setting up enough to provide the context. So yes, if I could see, I would get more detail, but what I've provided there in the audio is sufficient detail to meet the learning objective without overwhelming the person. Because if I can see, I'm not processing the details of this spreadsheet. I'm not. I'm getting a sense of it. And so we're providing a sense. Let me play that part again.
Here I have an inventory spreadsheet, and I want to highlight in red any cells where the item has more than $5,000 tied up in inventory.
Okay, and by the way, was that setup helpful for everybody? Like, and the other one, nobody knew why we were doing it. Here I'm setting up my goal up front. That's better for everybody.
To set up conditional formatting, start by selecting the cells you want to format. So I'll select the header for the inventory value column.
Remember I said sometimes just adding a few words. So I just added the words. So I'll select the column heading for the inventory value column. It's just that little bit extra to, I think, help everybody, but especially somebody who couldn't see what I was doing. I'll just do a few more steps.
Then on the Home tab, click the Conditional Formatting drop-down button and select the type of conditional formatting you want. In this case, since we want to highlight cells that meet certain criteria, we want Highlight Cells rules.
So there I had to make a decision. If I can see, I'd be able to see the 5 other choices. I chose not to include that and only talk about the focus of this. So technically, would somebody who could see learn a little bit more about conditional formatting? Yes. But one of the things you need to manage when you're providing extra context for someone who can't see is their cognitive load. It's true with alt text, it's true with audio descriptions. If I'm including so much detail, I mean, do I really need to say, oh, by the way, we're on the Home tab, but there's also an Insert tab and a Draw tab and a page layout. I mean, if you can see, you're learning other things about Excel right now. So I have to manage that. And do one more.
From the flyout menu, you'll select the type of argument you want, such as greater than or less than.
So there I only listed greater than or less than to let people, at least somebody who couldn't see, at least get an idea of what kind of thing are we talking about. So this is one approach, is adjust your language where sometimes adding just a few words can make it clearer to someone who can't see. And by the way, it might be helpful for it might be more helpful for everyone.
especially for me, when I look at a table like that with so many numbers, it can be overwhelming.
Mhm.
So, if you like pick the inventory value, so it's so much easier to say, go to the header and then you kind of point out where that is. It's definitely helpful for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, it's your job as an instructional designer to manage everyone's cognitive load. And when you're describing what someone who can't see needs to see, you need to be extra careful, because for those of us who can see, we are very good at zoning in on what's important and zoning out everything else, especially if the audio is helping us figure that out. So I'm going to do that subconsciously. I am subconsciously, with my eyes, ignoring most of what's happening here. So that's what we need to do for someone who is going to be relying on our audio, is not giving them too much information, but we also can't give them enough. Now, sometimes you can't put enough words in without it feeling clunky for everybody, where there's just too much going on visually, especially physical demonstrations, where there's no amount of words that would feel natural to someone who could also see it. So in that case, you can do what's called an audio description version. So with an audio description version it's a separate version of the video, where with a separate voice, a distinctly different voice, you pause the video and you splice in a description of the visuals that they would be otherwise missing. So this next one I'm going to demo has that, and it's a kind of a hybrid of the two scripts. It's not as sparse as the first one, but it's not as detailed as this one.
Provide two versions. Do you just provide two links in the training and say this is the audio description version?
Yeah, usually I would put the primary, the typical version on the slide, and then a button that usually pulls up the audio description version in a layer. Okay. Or if I'm in Rise, I usually use the tabs interaction that says standard version, audio description version, and they can pick whichever one they want.
Okay.
Okay, so let's try this one out.
There is an inventory spreadsheet with details like item number, quantity in stock, and the inventory value in dollars.
To set up conditional formatting, start by selecting the cells you want to format.
The demonstrator clicks the heading for column E, inventory value.
Then, on the Home tab, click the Conditional Formatting drop-down button.
A menu of options appears, including highlight cells rules, top, bottom rules, data bars, color scales, icon sets, as well as options for managing rules.
Okay, so that's the concept. Now you still have to decide how much detail to give. So I'm going to play that little bit again, and you'll notice I didn't describe every column and every row, but I did give a little more description than the previous one. So I gave a couple of representative values or columns, including the one that we're going to focus on. And then when I get to this menu, I summarized these bottom three. I didn't list all of them. So if you do this audio description version, you still have to make really smart choices about what's the right level of detail. So let me play just that little bit again and consider that I didn't describe everything, but I described a lot.
There is an inventory spreadsheet with details like item number, quantity in stock, and the inventory value in dollars.
To set up conditional formatting, start by selecting the cells you want to format.
The demonstrator clicks the heading for column E, inventory value.
Then, on the Home tab, click the Conditional Formatting drop-down button.
A menu of options appears, including highlight cells rules, top, bottom rules, data bars, color scales, icon sets, as well as options for managing rules.
And select the type of formatting you want. In this case, since we want to highlight cells that meet certain criteria, we want Highlight Cells Rules.
When the demonstrator selects Highlight Cells Rules, a submenu appears.
Next, you'll select
Okay,
the type
so I think
of
that
argument
gives you a
want.
sense. In this case, the alternate voice was a computer-generated voice, and that is very typical to use an auto-generated voice for that. Screen reader user is very used to listening to auto-generated voices, but you can certainly use a human as well. So, I had to write that. I had to decide what those would be. Companies like 3Play Media will do it for you, but then they're making decisions about what's relevant. So I'd be careful about letting a third party decide for you what needs to be described. Now you could have a third party execute it by putting in the pauses and the extra, doing all that extra editing work. but I'd be hesitant to turn, maybe I'm just a control freak. I'd be hesitant to turn over that.
It's a good way to learn how to do it yourself. I mean, there are times when you may have to send it to an external vendor based on your timeline and how much time you have. But I think it's an excellent way to learn to do it yourself. Let me just go to our last question, which is, how do we test to make sure, like in Storyline, to make sure that our audio and video are accessible? Would it be just like a final manual QA check?
Mm-hmm. Well, in terms of closed captions, first I would do a check to make sure all of them were covered. I'd look in the media library and check to make sure that they all had what they needed. There's an audio tab and a video tab, but not all videos need closed caption because it could just be like a background abstract video, something like that. So we have somebody watch all the closed captions. Are they synchronized properly? Are they spelled properly? Does it say who the narrator is if they need to, or who the voice is? So we have somebody manually read every word of every caption and make sure that's correct. And we do that towards the end, because if you make an edit to your audio, you got to remember to make an edit to your captions. Both the wording and the synchronization can change. So we do that. And then with the audio description as well as synchronized slides, we have somebody go through and really use that filter. If I couldn't see this, would I be confused? If I couldn't see this, would I be missing out on content? And then if we are doing the autoplay option, then we have somebody go through the whole course with autoplay turned off and make sure that every slide stops when it loads. And then we personally at Artisan, we want to make sure something appears on the slide, because if all of the objects on your slide have an entrance animation, and then you have this variable that says pause the audio when the timeline starts, your slide will be blank, completely blank. So we always make sure there's something on the screen right away. We also make sure that anything they have to click stays up until the very, very end. So if I have something they're supposed to click that appears in the middle and then disappears, I'm choosing for them how long it's going to take them to activate that. And someone with assistive technology or with certain cognitive disabilities might not, they might need more time. So anything that's interactive always stays up till the very, very end so that they have as much time as they need. So we have somebody who goes through the whole course to make sure that the audio autoplay works.
So the best practice would be to have a peer check or a QA, yes, somebody else, because it's easy to miss when you are developing your own course. Like,
I don't trust me. Like we are a big QA company that somebody else checks everything. I don't care who you are. I own the company and people are checking my work because human error is real. I don't care how conscientious you are, you will make a mistake. And we want somebody else to make sure they catch that.
Yeah, definitely. And especially when you keep looking at your training, right? Over and over again, you tend to miss things.
You also, absolutely. I also wanted to go briefly to the WCAG standard for audio descriptions, if I may.
Sure.
Let me pull that up. So there's a gray area about audio descriptions. So audio descriptions are the best practice, where if you cannot make it happen in the script and there's visual information that someone would miss, the best practice is a separate version where you pause and you put it in. However, technically that is AAA. Not technically, that is AAA. So let me go back up here. So AAA, and that's your alternative for time-based media. I'm sorry, no, that's your extended audio description. That's what I just showed you. An extended audio description is one where you pause to say what you need to say. And that's AAA. What's AA? AA is an audio description, but not extended. So if you go to understanding, one of the things it says here, it says, during existing pauses in dialogue, audio description provides information about actors, characters, scene changes, and on-screen text that are important and not described or spoken in the main soundtrack. During existing pauses. Well, imagine I'm a movie. Remember how these are not written for learning designers? Let's say that I'm a movie and there's a car chase. There's not a lot of dialogue. So there's plenty of time without pausing, without creating a separate version that's paused. There's plenty of time to describe what's happening. If I'm doing a nature video and there's a cheetah, tracking a gazelle, usually there's plenty of silences where you can splice in that voice without having to pause the video. So AA, you don't have to do that extended version where you pause the audio and splice something in. You only have to put it in during the existing pauses. Well, in a training video, how often do you have existing pauses? Like you don't. In that Excel video I showed you, there were not adequate existing pauses in the dialogue to do this work. So this is just a really gray fuzzy area for me, because does this say, oh, well, I filled as many existing pauses as I could. There weren't any, so I'm good. I've met this requirement, but I haven't helped anybody.
Right.
So this is one where we will often go to AAA because we can't do this with our type of work. The other thing that I have done in some cases, and I have an example here, is I will do a text audio description version. So this is not, let me see if I can find it. This is not specifically compliant in that it doesn't say you can do it. But AA says I'd use the existing pauses. Well, here I've got a video where there are no existing pauses. So technically I'm compliant, but I'm not being helpful. So instead of going all the way to an extended audio description, which is AAA and more than we need to do, we came up with a hybrid solution that the customer was happy with, where we made a text version of the audio description. So here's what the narrator says. The narrator is the beginning of the slide. There's just a little narrator. Then Dr. Corpe was the person who did the video. And then just as the Excel had that extra voice coming in, we're having that extra voice coming in just in text format. So if this had been a true extended audio description version, this is audio that would have been spliced in. So it's almost like the script of the audio description version without making it. So is this compliant? I actually don't know, because the true AA is usually kind of impossible for us to do if we don't have natural pauses in our videos.
People in our community want to connect with you. Where could they do that?
LinkedIn is my social media of choice. So feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, Diane Elkins. Feel free to shoot me an email if you want. I am D as in Diane, P as in Patricia, Elkins, ELKINS at artisanelearning.com.
I wanted to thank you so much for your time today, and has been valuable information because, there's so many, like you said, gray areas or fuzzy areas with audio and video, and especially with the guidelines being written for web and not for instructional designers. Right. I think it really helps to have an expert share their knowledge. So thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with our community.
Great. Thank you so much for doing this again.